Mr. Kasyanov, Anisa Nawe in Moscow, thank you both very much indeed for joining me. Let me first ask you, Mikhail Kasyanov. Mr. Putin, President Putin, seems to believe that Russia has an image problem and wants to change the way Russia is portrayed around the west of the world. Is it an image problem, or is there a problem, a policy problem?
That's a deep problem of the policy. The problem of Mr. Putin, because Mr. Putin believes that such a policy he pursues, internally and externally, that's normality in 21st century, which is absolutely not. And therefore, he is sometimes even angry on the Western society, why the Western society doesn't accept his regime as normal one. Therefore, that's a problem of mentality rather than of image.
Anisa, let me ask you, do you feel that Russia Today and other state-sponsored media is specifically designed to counter what your government, your president, believes is a bad image problem, an unfair shake in the West?
Just to be clear, he's not my president. I'm an American. He's the Russian president. And Russia Today airs to a global audience. So it's not really watched in Russia. It's in English. Many people across Russia don't really turn to Russia Today to get their news. And I certainly don't represent the Russian media as a whole. I represent RT and more so myself. But I think specifically about RT, because it's been in the media quite a lot recently, to focus on that. I think the thing about RT, which is misunderstood by a lot of people, not our viewers because they know very well, is that we have nothing to hide. People know where our funding comes from. We're Russia Today. We're funded by the Kremlin, despite the sort of addressing by foreign media. This is some kind of revelation of investigative journalists. Our budget is completely open. It's completely transparent, even though it's misquoted very often. And so it's interesting to us that these kind of questions are asked by the mainstream media, by a channel like CNN, who has journalists that have left the channel because documentaries on Bahrain haven't been run, like iRevolution a couple of years ago, which air programs like Eye on Georgia, Eye on Kazakhstan, Eye on Lebanon, which are essentially government-sponsored programs, and that's barely, very, very secretly disclosed to the audience. You really have to go on the site and dig for it to find that these are not sort of just basic, unbiased reporting on the ground. These are government-sponsored programs aired on television. So it's interesting to have questions asked of us, staff at RT, how do we feel about kind of representing the Russian government? Our viewers know that we're funded by the Kremlin. They watch RT with this in mind, and this is why we're getting viewers, because if you actually turn on RT, you'll see that we cite the Ukrainian government, we cite NATO, we cite the State Department, we cite the American side. Yes, of course, we also cite the Russian perspective, and of course, maybe even more so, because that's the perspective that we feel is being sidelined.
For months and months and months now, Russians and Russian state media and Kremlin-funded media such as yourselves have portrayed Ukraine as sort of phobic to pro-Russian separatists or minorities there, as neo-Nazis, fascists who just want to abuse and assault them. And that has appeared on your channel. And President Putin has said it several times. My question obviously is, what is the point of that? And let me first just play this piece of an interview from President Putin, not to your channel, but he said it before, to a German channel just this weekend.
We're truly concerned that the wish to start ethnic cleansing may soon arise there. We're afraid that the Ukraine will become immersed in neo-Nazism. You can see people wearing swastikas on their sleeves and the SS insignia on the helmets of some units fighting in the eastern Ukraine at the moment.
And of course, you all remember the big sort of billboards that Russian television and media put up during the Crimea referendum, equating, you know, Russia, or rather saying the choice is Russia or neo-Nazism. So I guess, Anisa, my point to you is, why go to such efforts to brand Ukraine as such when the polling data itself says that less than 2% of the people actually voted for any kind of far-right group?
Yeah, I agree it's important. And I think what you're trying to say is that it's perhaps being exaggerated, this threat of neo-Nazis, which perhaps is true. I'm not Russian. The Russian people lost almost 30 million people fighting fascism during the Second World War. Who am I to say that this is a made-up threat? There's clear documentation, Christiane, which obviously you have access to. Obviously, your audience, our audience has access to. There are people that walk through the streets of Kiev with swastikas on. There is this trend of tying in this kind of glorification of Nazism with the anti-Russian sentiment that is trying to be up in the West. And there's also, I think what Putin was referring to there was not so much the Nazi trends, but the civilians being killed, which organizations like Human Rights Watch, like Amnesty International, like your own reporter, I think, one of the most powerful reports I've seen from the East, to be quite frank, was not from Russia Today. It was from your reporter, Diana Magne, I should say, and she's in the East, and basically, it's a phenomenal report. I mean, it's horrific. And it was civilians in the East calling themselves Ukrainians and saying, stop killing us, Petro Poroshenko, stop killing us, to imply that this is not going on, that civilians are not being killed by the Ukrainian army. Let's be very specific here. And this is what you have on camera. Was this report aired on CNN around the clock? No. Again, Russia Today airs to the West, so we have a global audience. And we cover stories that we think affect a global audience. And especially with the Ukraine crisis, a lot of the mainstream narrative dictates what exactly we cover. We come to work and we see a lot of holes in the stories that you're telling your audience, holes that can be easily closed by just going online, trying to verify videos, trying to get kind of different sorts of perspectives on the air. So that helps a lot in trying to decide what we're going to cover. And I think it's careful when, you need to be careful when you start bringing these sort of nuclear threats taken out of context. This is a very serious issue, and as journalists we need to be careful when we pick and choose what quotes we want to give to a global audience. I have to say, I do not know what you're referencing specifically about this Russian, what Putin said to a Russian television. To be honest, I work a lot and I don't exactly watch the Russian media every night. RT airs to a global audience. I'm not sure exactly what channel you're referring to or what speech you're referring to, but I do know, but I want to make this clear, that I do know that Putin has made it very clear to the Russian people that he's not looking for war, but he will continue to protect Russian interests. And when you're talking about military aggression and about perspectives of Russia around the world, all you need to do is look at a map. Look at a map and look where Ukraine is, and look where Russia is, and look where the United States is, and then look at all of the countries and bases surrounding Russia, and tell the audience again that Russia is the aggressor here. Again, I have to point out that I don't represent the Russian media, but RT. I know the image you're talking about, of course. It should be pointed out also that that image was on the internet for quite a couple of months. Unfortunately, this channel took the bait. They didn't verify it. We did. Of course, that's why we didn't show it. But to sort of condemn the first channel for mistakes that we've all made. I remember very well Jim Clancy of CNN showing a video in Donetsk in May of this year of a supposed helicopter being downed by these anti-Kiev fighters. We went online, we checked the video. The video was from Syria. We never even saw a retraction from CNN. So it's a little difficult to judge. Obviously, this is a market. They were trying to perhaps have a scoop. It's a dangerous thing. It's very unfortunate that they took the bait, and it's a very dangerous trend. So all I can do as a journalist is, yeah, condemn it. It was a mistake, but they're certainly not the only journalists in the world that make mistakes like that. I think President Putin has made it very clear to both Russia and to the international community that what he wants is for Russia to be respected, mutually respected on an equal playing base, and that he wants dialogue to prevail. And so I think it's very dangerous to sort of talk about these kind of warnings in secret. I mean, there's nothing secret. All of this gets out. Obviously, you went and found this apparent secret nuclear conversation that he had to Russian media that wasn't supposed to get out. Everything is available. There are so many perspectives available. You can go online, you can analyze Russian media, you can analyze CNN, and the audience can go and view for themselves. But I think Putin has made it very clear that he wants stability in for his country and in this region, and he wants to get there through dialogue. I disagree that that's what's happening. Certainly at Russia Today. Like I said, we always cite the Ukrainian government. We always cite Western governments, Europe. If you want to analyze internal Russian news, I'm not sure I'm the best person to do it, to be honest. But certainly at Russia Today, we always try to show both sides of the story. Do we show more of a Russian perspective? Of course we do, because that's the perspective that's being sidelined. But it's an absurd question coming from someone that's propagated the line of the State Department for over 15 years. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. You've propagated the line of the State Department for over 15 years, starting with Yugoslavia and all the way into Syria. And now you're doing it for Ukraine, essentially. Absolutely, I'm talking to you. I've seen lots of your reports, and in not one report will you find you questioning the United States government and their policy. And we, with our Russian propaganda, question those arms to the FSA, question those arms to al-Nusra and other links. And now today, we have ISIS. But your audience should be aware of this, Christian. Your audience should be aware of this. You should disclose this to them. I'm glad they do, and I'm sure they know who James Rubin is. I'm sure they watched your work in Yugoslavia. Right, how dare someone tell CNN to check who their sponsors are, what governments they're working with. How dare someone come on CNN and say that? Well, let your viewers decide, Christian. I think that's the fairest way out of this debate. Let your viewers decide. Let them go back to your work in Yugoslavia. Let your viewers decide. Let them go back to your work in Yugoslavia and see if it doesn't fall exactly in line with the State Department's line. I know that interview very well. I know that interview very well, Christiane, and you were propagating war. You were basically encouraging Bill Clinton to go to war. I don't know what Bill Clinton wanted. I'm talking about your work as a journalist.